On to Beth's presentation and yeah, gratitude for that, Elise. And yeah, we'll keep you as a panelist here so you can see any questions that come in and feel free to respond to things in the Q&A as you go. So again, yeah, a fantastic job highlighting really, really fantastic work. Okay. Good to see you again, Beth. I think you need no introduction at this point. I appreciate your participation in this throughout the day, and I just will say that when we were putting this session together and um, deciding what to highlight, Beth's colleagues at Washington Department of Ecology said, um, ask Beth, whatever she presents will be gold. So, not to put you on too much of a pedestal,
Uh,
but I'm recognizing that your colleagues really appreciate your insights and your experience in this work throughout the years. So thanks, Beth.
well, yeah, thank you and goodness. Yeah, I'm quite sure I won't live up to those expectations. And following Elise, I mean, what an incredible example of collaboration, of thinking outside of the box and figuring out ways to facilitate the transfer of knowledge and information and problem solving. So, I come from an engineering background, and so I'm always just awestruck by how other people's brains work and how they're able to help people kind of reach inside themselves. So that was super fascinating. Okay, so yeah, as Meg said, I was asked to just maybe give some thoughts on collaboration, and it is something. I mean, it came up in the conversations around the legacy awards, but it really has been a theme, whether it's relationships or it's this business is about people coming together to solve problems, right? So go ahead and go to the next slide. Um, from my perspective, again, all about relationships, building and maintaining them, and that obviously takes time. It's not a one and done sort of situation. And fortunately, we have lots of different forums, whether it's meetings like this, or workshops, or drills and exercises, or planning and preparedness activities, or spills, where we get to build and strengthen those relationships. Um, and speaking to the issue of trust, trust is very important in those relationships. And if trust is lost, it takes even more time to rebuild those relationships. So being really aware of that and aware of this is a relatively small community. Even if you take spill response across the country, I think it was Jordan who said he walked into Deepwater Horizon and knew everybody in the room. And that's probably not an unusual thing in the spill response community. Um, and this kind of work, collaboration, it takes time. Like Elisa's example, a 2-day workshop where people come together, and a 2-year project to get to some endpoint, but it's worth it. And you get, well, I say greater buy-in, but you get a more robust work product, for lack of a better word, um, when you are really successful in bringing in these differing perspectives and ideas and thoughts about how things might go. And I think it's interesting. There's I think for in the world of spills, this kind of pre-spill and the planning and preparedness realm, there's this built-in motivation because of everything we do in that world creates success, when there's a bad day, when a spill actually happens. And so there's this kind of intrinsic motivation to keep those relationships strong, keep bringing in new perspectives and parties. So next slide. And that's really it's kind of baked in. From this comes, of course, from the United States sort of federal perspective, but I know that Canada has similar things. There are what we call the NCP, National Oil and Hazardous Substances Pollution Contingency Plan. It is built on a framework of collaboration. It predates EPA. It predates the Superfund law. It predates the Oil Pollution Act. It was the first document I think in 1968 was the first version of the NCP. And it was built on this concept of a national response system. And I would say we use that term a lot, but I'd also say a national planning and preparedness system. An acknowledgement, a recognition that no one individual agency or jurisdiction can go it alone in this world. We need the collective in order to be successful. So next slide. Just to, put more of a picture on that, of course, it includes this kind of nesting of plans at all levels, from the national down to industry plans. There should be state and tribal plans kind of between that green and red on the left. And then all of these organizations, these are the formal planning groups that are responsible for these plans. But we, of course, know the community is greater than that, larger than that. Go ahead, next slide. It's everyone. It's that national response system that's kind of articulated in the NCP, but it's all of the partners and stakeholders, anyone that has an interest, right? Which is pretty much everyone, down to a local family, a subsistence fisher, academia who is doing research, NGOs who are advocating on behalf of particular interests. And so the trick is, how do we bring people together effectively to hear voices and create good decisions, good tools, good policies, good procedures, all of those things that to the maximum extent possible meet the needs of the collective. Okay, next slide. So this is obviously an oversimplification, but we talk about outreach, and that's kind of a standard, at least of government. We do a lot of that. It's a pretty one-way communication. Websites and mailers and those sorts of things. It's a good way to provide information, but it isn't engagement. It isn't more of a two-way process where we actually can gain a mutual understanding of perspectives and integrate differing ideas and concerns into a problem or an issue. And so, engagement is really that collaborative, reciprocal, active, ongoing process by which we can gain a better understanding and knowledge and make, in my opinion, better decisions. So next slide. So, the classic examples of outreach, again, government's very good at doing this, putting up websites and hopefully keeping them up to date as much as we can. There's lots of incredible information. This is the Alaska Regional Response Team and the DEC companion websites that we've spent a lot of time and energy trying to make them visually appealing, making information accessible. So these are great tools, but they are really just outreach, kind of that one-way communication. Next slide. The examples in the Northwest, again, our websites, we have quick response guides. We have geographic response plans, which are, they're posted there for people to see, but I want to come back to the concept of where those started in a bit. So go ahead, next slide. So what are some both outreach and engagement best practices? Again, back to the relationships, building one-on-one relationships wherever possible. That's where that trust is built, and then you can build on that to be able to have more difficult conversations, more complex engagement and conversations. Go to where others are. Don't expect people to come to you. I think EPA has learned that. Well, we're still learning it, honestly, the hard way. We'll plan a public meeting. We'll put out, fact sheets and send mailers, and then we get, 10 or 15 people to come, and usually there's 10 or 15 government people in the room as well. So going to, the community meetings or the the church meetings or the fair, the county fair, going to the places where communities gather versus expecting a community member or other interested stakeholders to come to yet another, sort of forum to learn about something. And bring something to the table that, we are often expecting, um, you know, information and input. We're required by statutes to seek input on whether it's a rulemaking or a new plan or what have you. But if we can bring something to the table, like a training opportunity, or better yet, like Department of Ecology with some of their equipment grants, that creates again those more lasting relationships. Um, Task or issue-based engagement, and I'll share an example of where I think this has been successful. But people are overwhelmed with the amount of information in just their daily lives that are coming to them. Tribes and First Nations are really good examples of where there is just so much demand on attention from particularly government sources, really, to get our message across or get input. And so really focusing or targeting what is the particular topic that you need to engage with somebody or some organization on, so that it's relevant to them and not just kind of lost in the noise of things. Casting a wide net, and being consistent and reliable in the methods by which we communicate, and following through, if we're advertising a meeting or we're coming to something, making sure we follow through with that. Using multiple methods of communication. We are trying, to do that more and more. Social media and traditional, we've relied, I think, I'll just speak for EPA, we rely on, again, those pushes of information, a fact sheet, a postcard, an email to a listserv. But I think we need to adapt to more multiple methods of communication, meeting people where they are. I guess I already really spoke to the targeted versus general, and uh, putting the work in ahead of some of these events that bring in these concepts of bringing something to a community, whether that's a training or an exercise or some kind of workshop. But don't short that pre-work of getting people to the table, helping them understand why it's important that they're there, what it will give to them, how will they benefit? Because just listing how many exercises or how many workshops we've had, if we really didn't get people there and get good conversations going about how we move things forward, then arguably we weren't successful. Next slide. So some examples, and again, this is just from my perspective, of some successful engagements we've had in the Northwest and Alaska over the last many years. I think the initial GRP development and the ongoing verifications, though, that back in the early to mid 90s, that was a really grassroots process. One of the first times that I had experienced that sort of thing, where we consciously, went into a community in a structured way, went into an area, I won't say just a community, and had building blocks. And really, it wasn't just, the government presenting, okay, here's what we've developed on your behalf to protect the resources that we think you care about. It was getting everyone, to the extent we could, around the table to help identify what those resources were that needed to be protected, and how we would go about doing it. And through that, while it was sort of a process to get something on paper, it was also, the benefits were that people understood oil movement better than they did before they came to the room. They understood, hopefully, better that sometimes certain resources may not be able to be protected. The complexities of our environment may be such that we are not able to, or if we throw all the resources in this one place, then all of these other places will will potentially be impacted. So that kind of learning process, and that over many years, that I think was a really good example of successful engagement. And I want to just give props to Department of Ecology for really leading those efforts initially, and then of course Oregon DEQ getting starting their program, and in Alaska as well. Another example, I think, is our current ongoing tribal engagement subcommittee. We form under the RRT-10 and the former Northwest Area Committee. We formed a subcommittee particularly around the question of how do we increase tribal engagement in all of the work that we do, whether it's planning, preparedness, or response. And, we've had some really great visionary leaders of that group, and they've all brought sort of their own flavor to that. But I think, and it's grown, there's been momentum kind of growing, but each of those meetings, it seems like, have more and more people involved, more and more people are speaking up, and they've tried various different things like small group coffees and things like that to make it more of an engagement opportunity versus just kind of outreach. Our planning summits in the Northwest were another really good example of how we consciously invited in stakeholders to help us prioritize the work that we would do. In Alaska, we recently formed a regional stakeholder committee task force. We had some concerns and there were some spill responses that had that how do I say there wasn't a common understanding of expectations around the role of a regional stakeholder committee, and there'd been prior attempts to sort of talk through these issues and concerns, but they were not successful. This latest effort was successful, and it was successful, I think, largely because it was approached really from a true engagement, hearing all the perspectives approach. We've also had different seminars over the years where we've really consciously tried to bring in people to be part of setting policy and coming up with the tools that we use. Area committees can be a really successful engagement, but we have to be careful about that. Again, kind of taking into mind some of the other things about, making sure it is a two-way engagement or more multiple way. It's not just a talking head sort of thing, talking about issues that people care about, not just that the government agencies care about, bringing meetings to communities versus expecting them to come to us. Next slide. So some takeaways, effective engagement really does take time and effort, but it pays off with those relationships and the trust that's built. And predictability and consistency also helps build trust. And again, meeting stakeholders where they are and bringing something to them. Don't expect that this is their top priority every day and that they are going to come to us. Next slide. This is the last one. And so what does success really look like? Diverse input on all of those planning and preparedness decisions, tools, processes, a robust plan, so to speak. We also, success is well-informed and engaged stakeholders so that they understand some of the trade-offs and the difficult decisions that have to be made. We have better prepared response partners, and all of those things give us more effective response operations. Again, it's sort of this built-in motivator for all of this hard work. It pays off when we have a bad day and there is a spill and we know the people and we've got those relationships, we've got trust built, we have solid tools that were developed collaboratively with lots of different perspectives in mind. That is success in my mind. That's it.
Thank you, Beth. Appreciate that. Some good things to take away. And again, these presentations will be available to folks and available to share with your colleagues. So if you heard things that Beth shared that resonated with you, you will have the opportunity to come back to them and maybe even pin them to the work that you do and kind of revisit them on a regular basis.